right. Well, it's 2 p.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started with our panel. This afternoon, we're starting off with our panel on prime contractors and what to expect, or what primes are expecting from their supply chains. I have three great gentlemen up here on the stage with me today. I've got Matt Ramsey from BlueHalo. I have John Kronick from Tutor Perini, and Matt Reynolds from Marvin Engineering. Yes, please, go ahead.
Great. Awesome.
Can I get that?
I love the graphic.
I wanted that one. Oh, what a god.
Awesome. All right. So let's start out. The first thing I'd like to do is have you guys introduce yourselves and introduce your companies. And as you're going through the introduction, I'd like to give just a little bit of scale as far as the number of companies that you have in your supply chain, if you could just kind of weave that into your answer. So, Matt, would you like to start?
I will start off, and I'll keep it to the 20-minute version. So, Matt Ramsey, there is a correction on your slide as of last Thursday. I am now CIO of AV, which is a merger between BlueHalo and a company named AeroVironment out of California with a lot of their operations. So we've gone from being little nothing when I was first around to buying and integrating 21 companies, now a final merger with AV, which takes us into a publicly traded status. And we have close to 4,000 people, $2 billion top line revenue, and lots of crazy stuff we're doing. So as far as the company operations, as the BlueHalo side that you used to know, we were doing things like laser weapons, counter drone, RF technologies, next generation counter UAS missile, virtual Stinger trainers, cyber intelligence, unmanned underwater vehicles, things like that. AeroVironment brings to the table, when we merge together, a very complementary set of technologies, mostly in the uncrewed systems and loitering munitions. So if you think about these things you may have heard in Ukraine called switchblades, you fly them and an operator flies them around until they see a target and tell it to go attack. Those are things that the Heritage AeroVironment has been doing. And if you looked on LinkedIn today and you look for something called Red Dragon, you will see the next very cool, very scary phase of what we're bringing to the market with a autonomous, GPS non-dependent, and a thing that can hunt and kill without any control and command from a remote system. So it's going to be a very scary tool for people receiving it. To answer your final question, supplier-wise, I don't have a good count. I'm thinking 120 subcontractors or so. I'm looking in the audience for a nod, yes, give or take. So that's where we are at scale now.
All right, thank you. All right, John, same question.
Hi there, I'm John Kronick. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Tutor Perini. Tutor Perini is a very large construction company. We build everything from tunnels under the Hudson River. We do airport extensions. We build bridges. But we're a conglomerate of about 18 companies, 4 of which are building for military. So we build bases, we build housing units, we build missile batteries, but not the munitions or any of the ITAR stuff. The biggest thing that's going on for us, and there's about a $20 billion backlog that we have, and that's most of that's in the DoD space, because a few months ago, and this was supposed to be not public, but YouTube ran a thing on the armament of Guam, right? Building it into a super fortress to combat China, right? And so they flew over us with drones and everything, filming the military runways we were building and all this other stuff. I don't know how they got that, how it got cleared, but anyways, and that's what we're doing. So. And then we have 3 other companies that are building Army bases and things like that around the country. So when it comes to subcontractors, it depends where it is. For Guam, it's a set number of subcontractors and suppliers. There's not too many suppliers for Guam, right? But when it comes to, like, we got a bid to build an Army base in one of the states, and we have to go find suppliers and subcontractors in that local area, right? And so, we're looking at probably at least 1,200 suppliers. We're looking at about 800 subcontractors right now. So it's not a small number.
Right, yeah. All right, Matt.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Matt Reynolds. I'm the CIO for the Marvin Group. And the Marvin Group has been around for about 60 years. We're in Inglewood, California. We actually supply, it's a collection of companies, Marvin Engineering, Marvin Land Systems, and we just acquired Bradshaw Engineering Technical Services out of Huntsville, Alabama. And basically what we do is airborne armament equipment for F-35, F-18, pretty much any of the fighters that you see out there today. If they've got something hanging off their wing, it's probably manufactured by Marvin. We're one of the largest manufacturers of that equipment. And as I said, we've been around 60 years in supporting the warfighter. To your other question, specific to our supply chain, and thank you for allowing me to weave this in, I got some numbers. I was looking at some numbers for our supply base, and we have a lot of suppliers, and a lot of our suppliers are mom and pop shops that have one computer in a corner, or I'm sure you guys are familiar with those. But we did a survey in 2023 and said, hey, tell us about your NIST compliance and where you're at as a supply base. And we got 350 suppliers who responded to our survey that actually had said they've done something with NIST. And the numbers break down into like 36% of them said that they have all 110 controls implemented. Most likely delusional, but they said they had that. Okay. 76% said that they have a POAM. So of the ones that didn't have the 110, only 76% of them said that they had a POAM in place. So that means that 24% of the folks that had not implemented the controls did not even have a POAM in place at the time. And 4 reported that they had some DIPCAC assessments, 2 high and 2 medium. And I think these numbers really just will let you know, and for you guys, that most of your supply base, even today, it was a couple years ago, but I think even today it still holds true, they don't really know what they're up against yet. And I think this conference and other conferences like it really help the supply base, and it's our job to help these folks understand a little bit better. But I think people really just don't understand the daunting task that's ahead of them to get compliant, stay compliant.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. So basically up here on the stage, we're looking at 2,500-ish suppliers probably across the 3 companies, 3 pretty different areas of focus. So, probably different supply chains in and of themselves. So, some questions that I want to start off with is, how are you communicating with, those supply chains about CMMC today? Are you, are you communicating from a contract standpoint? Are you communicating through BD channels? Are you communicating directly to executives? How is that taking place today about these requirements?
I'll kick that one off. Most of what's happening today is through our contract shop, and the general approach right now is attestation. So as part of the contracts, if we're issuing a subcontract to one of the suppliers, and there's 7012 and whatnot clauses in there, that will get flowed down to the subcontractor to basically provide an attestation on their status. We will ask for scores and things like that. I don't think we get that back very frequently. But we do get them to attest to their current status. And so right now it's a trust without verification per se, for us at least.
Yeah, and I'll answer that too. So we do it on a contract by contract basis because we don't know who we're going to reach out to because of what we do. And before we can share any kind of information, we have a certification form right now. That'll change once the certifications come out, right? But right now, we ask them 4 things. Number 1, have your people who are going to receive this information gone through CY training? Number 2, have you completed completed the 800-171 controls? Are you compliant with that? Have you posted your SPURS score? Then we'll ask them what the score was, and then we try to get them to share the information without breaching their confidentiality. And then the 4th thing is, if we're going to share it, which medium are we sharing that data? In other words, do you have a secure email system? It's in a FedRAMP cloud, et cetera, and we verify that. So we don't share anything that we can't verify.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do something different, similar, but we, as those two guys said, but we also have a supplier conference. So we do, every 2 years, our supply chain holds a conference with all of the suppliers, the key suppliers for our products. And the last couple times I've been able to get on the agenda to talk about NIST and CMMC. But I will say that we haven't really driven the verification process or anything like that in terms of where they're at. It's just more informational and getting them understanding of kind of what the task is. But we don't really, other than the survey, which is self-certified even to us, we haven't really dug in as well as I think we should.
So what do you think? I mean, I think pretty consistently across the board, you're saying you're basically taking self-certification. You're basically taking their word for it, right? You're not asking for, proof, if you will. What do you think your next steps are right now? Now that certifications are available, they're out there in the marketplace, you can actually go sign up and get a certification assessment. Although, getting one is getting harder because, the slots are filling up. In fact, we've been talking to some C3POs here today that basically said, they're fully booked for the year, for 2025. They have no dates left in 2025. Right. So, that's going to become a challenge potentially. So what is your next step as a prime to ensure that your supply chain is actually, you're verifying it?
Go ahead first.
Yeah, so we're actually trying to do an education program with them. In fact, we're trying to partner with Summit 7 on this program. But, first of all, you got to realize you have a problem. You have a knowledge gap and you have a certification gap. And if we're going to use you on future projects, it's got to happen. So we're trying to get them educated right now. So that's going on right now. With some of the subcontractors who have done work in the past, we know basically where they stand. But trying to get them to get certified is going to be a bit of a challenge. But they're ahead of the game because they've already gone through most of the controls. And so I think we're good. The suppliers, not so much. But what we're trying to do is de-identify or decouple some of that CUI data so that for what we do, we're in the building industry, right? So a lot of this stuff is COTS products, which is exempt from CMMC. So what we're trying to do is break it out so that if we're going to build a building for 50 units, right, and we use the same plywood, so we need 200 sheets of plywood, we can go down to Home Depot and get that, right? So that's not going to be CMMC required. So we're trying to split out that, and so we're working on that program. And that helps because then we can use a lot more suppliers and subcontractors. But where we're building a missile battery, that it's a different story. And so we have to get them certified, and that's where we're going for that.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, from our perspective, certification, validating a supplier's certification is a big challenge, almost impossible, really, unless you've got teams and teams of people who are going to go in and do assessments, and that's just not even practical from a business standpoint. So we're going to have to rely as much as possible on their self-certification. But to John's point, we're also looking at how do we isolate those suppliers that get the technical data package from those that don't, and focus our efforts on the ones that are receiving these technical data packages and doing education and other things to ensure that they stay compliant. So we're very nascent in that. I'll just be upfront with that, but we're marching toward that goal.
Yeah, I was going to say we're a hybrid of all this too. We were just talking earlier today. We had a meeting back in April with our supply chain guys, and trying to be like, how do you actually put the warning order out there with enough force that you scare them into actually thinking about this a little bit more? So I just re-engaged this morning too with our head of procurement. One of the things I wanted to get them to do is to basically send out a notice as well as a current status update request. And the notice would say, CMMC is real. We've completed our assessment. We scored. We're hearing from the DoD that the self-attestations are not realistic and that we're going to likely see mandatory third-party assessments included in our procurements, and you are at risk if you do not have this in place of being an ongoing supplier to BlueHalo /AV/. And then the second part is requesting, like, what is your plan for being in the pipeline for getting a third-party assessment done? Where do you stand?
That's kind of what leading into my
Yeah.
next question, right? Is, if you're having these conversations with your subs, are you asking them for specific information like a date? Do you have a C3PAO lined up? Are you asking who that C3PAO is? I mean, are you asking for detailed data that, if they don't answer, you're pretty clear that they're not ready, they're not, taking it seriously, what have you. Are you guys asking that kind of detailed information?
That's what I'm pushing our team to do now.
Right.
They just sent out a whole bunch of contract notifications about the merger, and I was hoping they would include it in there, but they didn't. So I'm going to try to pressure them to get this done next, because I think it's really critical to alerting our team that this is a real issue for them when they start looking at suppliers. We've also got to get into the business development side and the kind of the team building part of it, where when they go to look for who are they going to be their partners, it's got to probably start even that
Yes.
soon, because if they don't have it then, the chances of them being ready by the time the procurement is ready to award are probably zero. So
yeah,
it's
that's
an
absolutely
education on our part.
So are you guys asking for that side?
Yeah, we already put out a questionnaire, much like our certification statement, with details on it to ask, where are they at in that process? When do they think they're going to get certified? But we realize that it's mostly the subcontractors that we do most of the work down there, like in Guam. It's going to be the same ones, and they're ahead of the game, and we know they're going to get it. But as far as getting the dates, I don't have the firm dates on it, so yeah.
Scott, no, we are not, but I took a note, and we're going to start doing that based on what you said.
Cross-panel
But I think it's a
education.
great idea.
Yeah.
So we're not doing that yet, no.
Yeah, I mean, gathering that kind of information I think is really important, so you can get a picture of your supply chain so that you can
Right.
understand, okay, I've got X amount of my supply chain that's at risk, and this set of my supply chain I think is right. I mean, I've even heard rumors of, large companies even looking at acquiring C3PAOs simply to focus them on their own supply chain. So I don't know if that has, occurred to anybody on the stage, but I know that has been thought about in other threads. So
We have natural homegrown talent that will take care of that for us sitting in the audience.
And I think that would be a problem for independents, though,
right, right.
So we didn't look at that.
Okay. So what percentage of your supply chain do you think is at risk at this point?
Well, unless you decouple the CUI
like
data
Tutor.
or de-identify it, probably 85, 90% of it's at risk.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say
Seriously,
so.
at least.
There's very few people that are certified, very few people that really know how to do this yet. I think the vast majority of the supply chain is at risk at this point.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
large percentage. large
Yeah,
percentage.
and I'll just tie into that too, kind of like what John was saying too, is it's also an internal education on when do you have to completely flow down these requirements? How can you provide, sanitized data? Is it really required to that supplier? So I think that's part of a risk mitigation, is just looking at that and educating our own people. And that we don't, to my knowledge, we don't push back on the government when they email us something that's marked, that's probably overmarked. And that's something that we might have to get a little bit more granular and go back and say, hey, is this really truly this? Or can you supply us a version that is not CUI so that we can flow that down and get them to declassify in their mind?
Do you think that's going to cause going through that process is labor intensive, right? To go through, data that you've received from the government, de-identifying it to be able to flow down so that you don't have to have subs that do it. Do you think that's going to require your teams to staff up in, say, your contracts area or what have you to be able to do that kind of,
Yes.
Or the companies are willing to make that investment to be able to do that?
Yes, because really for us in the construction business for DOD, there's no other way. There's so much of our materials that are COTS products. We had this one situation where there was an order for like 100 air conditioning units. Okay, you can get those from GE or whatever. Okay, that's fine. But this one addition to it was we want stainless steel covers on them, right? So the question is that COTS or is that a modification, right? And so is it now in scope for CUI or is it not, right? And so these are the kind of decisions that we have to make and come up with from a legal standpoint, so we get legal opinion, so we can do that. But without de-identifying or the data, there's no way around this for us. Because when I first came up with the survey, certification survey, to send out to the subs and suppliers, management pushed back on that. Like, you're going to scare them all away. we can't, complete the projects, right? And I'm like, it's going to have to happen, right? Because, the regulation is regulation. So, when we get the award, we've already, agreed that we're meeting the requirements. So there's no two ways about it. So we finally got management buy-in to that, so we were able to send that out. But the subs and the suppliers have very little understanding of what the regulations are. They just know how to build buildings, right? So this is a challenge, and they don't want to know. They just,
They just want to keep building buildings.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's going to be a problem, okay? So that's why we're saying we're going to have to come up with a training program that these are the ones that we use mostly, particularly in Guam, and we're going to get them trained up so they understand it. They're going to get the process in, and it's going to happen. So.
Have you run across suppliers, subcontractors that you feel are so critical to what you're doing in your business, and you don't feel good about where they are, that you would consider acquiring them and rolling them in simply so that you can maintain that relationship? Is that something that's been looked at?
Yeah, we do that.
We
So, for instance, Tutor, Perini, they when they build things, it's electrical, HVAC, plumbing, everything, rebar, and everything else. Well, we got so tired of looking to suppliers for rebar, we created our own company recently. So we do all of our own stuff. So now it's covered under our CMMC umbrella. So we did that with HVAC and electrical and plumbing and architecture, engineering. So, but we still have a huge need for the subcontractors. So based on that, we're going to get them trained up and get them certified one way or the other. That's how we
So this kind of goes back to the last panel we had and talking about the consolidation of the defense industrial base, right? Companies look to vertically integrate, right, to make sure that they can deliver to their customers. You're going to see, continued consolidation, M&A activity. I mean, you guys have done 21 companies in the last
Just two. No.
21 companies in the last few years, and I don't see that slowing down. So
Yeah, I would say that I don't think the discussions on our acquisitions have been around risk from a CMMC and compliance standpoint. It's been more about technology synergies or uniqueness of a supplier technology that we wanted to maintain access to. So I personally have not seen us be like, we've got to acquire them because they're not going to be able to be compliant on a contract that way. But that's an option always.
Well, but in our case, as I mentioned, we just did an acquisition, and the nice thing was we spent a bunch of time bringing them into our CMMC compliant environment, which allowed them to then accept these contracts that they would not have otherwise been able to get. So it was a real discriminator there.
Yeah, and they're still contracting as their case code, so you need to get them up to speed. Yeah.
Good.
So when you're flowing down and you're having these conversations with these subcontractors, obviously you have all the flow down clauses that you have to send. You've got your 7012, 1920, 21, et cetera. Are you including additional contract language beyond just the flow down clauses that say, something about, having to maintain certification or what have you, that goes beyond just the boilerplate, flow down clauses? Or are you doing anything contractually beyond that? You are?
Yeah, we are. We always customize the contract requirements.
What kind, can you share the kind of language that you might use beyond just the standard flow down clause?
Part of it's in the legal side of things. Any kind of misrepresentations or failure constitutes a breach, that kind of thing. So they have to comply with whatever the 7008, 7012, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also if they use a subcontract, second layer subcontractor, suppliers, et cetera, that they're responsible for that, and that, if there's a breach, they're held liable and things like that. So that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that we've included specific language like that. I think it would fall under the default clauses, and that they're not compliant with the flow downs that we gave them. But
So I want to pivot a little bit to kind of the BD capture process and how, CMMC and these requirements are affecting that BD and capture process for new contracts, right? We've been talking a lot about existing subcontractors and existing contracts. Let's talk a little bit about the BD process. So obviously you all have significant capture and BD teams, right? That's how you continue to win work.
Right.
What kind of conversations are you having with your teams internally about these requirements and what they're going to have to deal with as they're building out their team? Are you telling them that, hey, you cannot go build a team if you can't certify that they're all going to be ready to go? I mean, are you having those kinds of conversations?
Yeah, we just had one on an Army contract that the team came to me about, what is our requirement for being compliant with, the 7012 and then CMMC if this thing goes into the time period or doesn't get awarded until, CMMC is officially in a contract. And they're complaining to me that, well, how are we supposed to find, subs that are compliant? It's tough enough finding them, that are compliant with the 7012, but to get certified, it's very difficult for us. Like I said, if we're building an Army base in Ohio, we have to go find local contractors, subcontractors, and it's tough, and none of them are postured to be compliant with this, and not even thinking about it, because it might be a one-off project for them. Okay, so that makes it tough for us. So then, if we're going to use a sub that is compliant, we're going to have to bring them in from somewhere else that we know that they're compliant, and it's been a real showstopper for us right now.
so, John, though, in your situation, what is the CUI you would need to pass through them to pull them having to be fully compliant?
Yeah, so this is the argument that we have with like the Navy and the Army and now the Marine Corps is when they said something was CUI, for instance, geolocation for the make of the base, the perimeter of the base and everything, that is CUI data. We had one situation where we had to get a trucker to get a big dump truck to go to the one harbor to get rocks off the ship, bring them over to the other side of the island and dump them in the ocean to make a breakwater, okay? And because what was in the contract was a geolocation of the Navy base, and so that was supposed to be protected, and he has, the poor guy is just a truck driver dumping rocks, right? And so we had to work around that to make that compliant. But these are the kind of challenges that we have that we haven't been able to overcome yet. And so our interim fix here is use those that we know are compliant, and we'll be able to get their CMMC certification and work on the training for others, and going out to our supply chain and inviting them to get compliant, and we're trying to figure out what is the average cost for a small or medium-sized sub or supplier to get compliant, and do they want to, undergo that cost and maintain that compliance level? And that's a challenge for us.
And it was kind of a loaded question asking you that, because for me to go to a sub to buy an optical system or a laser system for weapons or something, it makes perfect sense that these people should be in the know and be aware and be willing to invest the time and money for it. And so for me, I think it's a different situation. For you, if I'm going to go buy something like a service like that, and I was that kind of contractor, I'd be like, what are you talking about, So I think that's a lesson, is really how far does it extend into each of our supplier chains that we've got going on, and what is the real risk there for them? The awareness, they might even be aware in your situation. In mine, I would hope that they would be.
Well, we have, so when you think about the building industry, you don't think of things like HVAC. There's remote connection to the HVAC system, to the, what was the other thing? Elevator system, okay? all remotely controlled, okay? And so therefore, those have to be compliant. And so we have our own teams that do that now, that are compliant.
Are you getting pushback from BD capture teams about the requirement set that you have to do further education on?
Yes. Oh, yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and I'll just say in Marvin's case, again, we kind of have a mix of suppliers from both of you guys. We have a lot of, like I said, mom and pop shops that are just doing rivets or whatever for the launchers. So, but this part of that, the BD capture team, and this kind of discussion is very, very, again, nascent's the only word that comes to mind. They're just really starting to understand how to have the conversation and then how to flow that conversation to the supply base. So we're just starting that journey, if you will, of really trying to understand that and understand how to manage that.
So now that certifications are available and you're having these conversations with the capture and BD teams, and they are trying to determine the status of these companies that they're working with, are you guys asking for, like we talked about in the last panel, the actual certificates? Are you asking for that as proof? And okay, so you are.
Yep.
So you are. Are you guys doing that? Are you doing it yet?
Not yet at that stage, yeah.
So John, are you guys asking for your subs certificates?
Yeah, so anybody that they're using that we know that they're in contact with CUI information, or if they're working on this project that has CUI, yes, we have to get that certification.
Okay, so is that a way that you're using to potentially illuminate your entire supply chain? Is that a method that you're using to do that? Because I know that historically, DoD and primes and such have a very hard time illuminating their entire supply chain simply because, you've got, tier 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 14, whatever it is.
Right.
But if all those certificates roll up, then that could certainly be a way that you guys could potentially use to illuminate that supply chain. So
yeah, and one of the drawbacks of that is some of the executives were saying was, well, if we help this supplier or this sub get their certification, well, then a competitor can pick them up and everything. And it's like, well, they can pick them up now. So what's the difference, right? So
right.
Well, there's another challenge, and depending on how much help you get, because I remember early on in our NIST journey when we were talking with one of our big primes about, hey, well, can you help us figure out how to do this? And they're like, nope, we can just point you to the documentation. You guys go figure it out, because they don't want to assume the liability of you guys helped us, and now we can blame them if something goes wrong. So you got to be really careful about that aspect of the management of the supply chain as well.
Yeah.
So we're about to switch into questions from the audience, I believe. But one final question, it's a little bit different than supply chain, but I'm just interested in how you guys are thinking about this problem. What are the plans that you guys have for looking at 800-171 R3, and are you considering CMMC L3 with 800-172? So.
Yeah, I'll start with that. We were just talking about that earlier. I think the R3 comes into play probably much sooner for some people with the Canadian business going on there. If you're having something like that, for us, I think it's we're really looking at one of the tool sets which we use from one of your vendors here is coming out with an R3 mapping from the R2 into the R3 side in aka Feature Feed, which has been a great tool for us. And so I think we're looking at like when that comes out to give us a little bit of visibility into what we've got to do and how we map that. And then as we move forward with the integration with the AV environment, trying to figure out like where do they stand and their assessments and matching our technology bases and moving forward. So it's in the plan now to start looking at that now that we've completed the R2 assessment. And L3, level 3, I think is one of those discussions of we've got to figure out what is the next jump to get to that if we decide to do it enterprise-wide. And then, or do we do it in an enclave fashion? Right. And simple things like BYOD availability, and how do you do that for a 4,000 person company if you do it as an L3 and you can't do a BYOD solution?
You do it as Hypori, and we can have that conversation later.
We've got Hypori too. We've got a lot of your suppliers and vendors. And likewise, just to kind of give a plug again for the ecosystem you guys have here. Instead of us telling them what to do, we're leveraging the resources you guys and your teammates are bringing together as an ecosystem to say, go talk to these folks. They will help you get to where we need to be.
Yeah, so we actually have Canadian clients, and we are doing work up there, and so we are subject to the R3 version. And we are trying to internally, do the gap analysis to figure out, what else do we have to do, to tune our compliance to one size fits all, so that, and that's really where we're going. But, we just had a project recently that it was a state and local project, and it's funded by the DOT and Department of Homeland Security. And they pushed down that it's SSI, sensitive security information, which is what? CUI. It's a category of CUI. And so they wanted to know, how are we protecting this information? Well, project executive had no idea what he's talking about, right? And so they got me on the phone. I said, yeah, that's CUI. All that has to go through our enclave for protected CUI. And so we had this big discussion with the client, with the feds, and of course with our people, to make sure that everything routes through our compliant solution. But we're seeing, we're getting more of this. We have more projects that are going to be under the Rev 3 of the 800-171. So we're trying to quickly get up to speed and compliant with that.
Thank you.
So at Marvin, we're hanging our hat on the indefinite deviation. And so we're waiting for any time that changes, then we'll start reading the Rev 3.
Okay.
We just have so much on our plate we haven't really thought
You're just
about.
trying to keep your head above water.
We're just trying to keep our head above water, and we've read it, but we're not ready to do anything with it yet. And
Just
so
keep swimming, right?
We're just, pretty much.
All right, very good. So why don't we take some questions, Jacob?
Sure, yeah. So we got some in the audience here. We'll start with one online while we bring the mic over. So a nice, simple 3-part question here for you. So do you anticipate your supply chain shrinking as a result of making people meet their requirements? If so, how much? And if so, are you trying to build redundancy into your supply chain just in case some people who are telling you that they can make it don't make it?
Yeah, we definitely see that the supply chain is going to shrink. A lot of companies already told us we're not interested in going there, and you're going to have to look for somebody else. And we will. I mean, we will find them, and we're going to do everything to get our suppliers compliant if we need them. If we need them that bad, and they're a specialty for what they do, or particularly for us in Guam, you don't have too many choices. So yeah, we're going to do that. Redundancy, it's like I said about the Army base, right? If we're trying to build something in Ohio and we can't find it locally, we'll pull someone from somewhere that we know is compliant and bring them at additional cost. But that's the only thing that we can do.
I would say that one other thing is the way to reduce the impact of a reduction of your supply base is to truly, what we talked about before, which is identify who actually needs to get the CUI.
Yeah.
So then you won't have as much of an impact on your supply base.
And I'll just add on to that too. I mean, part of our risk management there would be limiting the scope of the CUI, would also be if it's a smaller entity of people that need access, can we supply equipment and bring them as contractor consultants into our environment? Could be a high-query style solution with some hybrid there.
That's a perfect segue into my question. We had subcontracted to Accenture at one point, and their requirement was for them to issue us their equipment, for us to use their equipment, for us to use their network. Have any of you three or any of you four considered doing that for subs, weighing the cost of an actual acquisition of the company to buying a GCC high license for the key users, and have them work in your environment?
We actually do that already, but not for all of our subs. So anybody that kind of works for us in a kind of a full-time, sort of a contractor basis, we issue our equipment, they get our email address, they can't use any of their own stuff. But if it's an actual sub, we let them use their own stuff.
Yeah, I'll say for us, I mean, we've done projects where we need 12 engineers to come help support a rapid build-up on a project, and we will issue them equipment and whatnot to keep our data safe and isolated, and we can monitor what's going on in the device as well. We haven't yet taken a true contractor who's participating as a company and done any kind of a large deployment that way.
Yeah, and we will provide company-owned laptops or iPads or whatever that connect directly up through our enclave for something that's being done at one of the bases where we have a sub that's working on that part of it, and they need to see the plans and whatever. And we have to have them go through the training. We get them an ID in our system, and it's all company-owned stuff. But other than that, we don't give subs or suppliers any of our stuff to use.
Actually, this kind of spurred another question outside of the one that I had. So I'll start with that, just that way we're not off topic. But as far as integrating subs into your environment, with CMMC rolling online, that's not really a replacement for your subs having CMMC. So does that actually answer the question, or does that actually get to the point of flowing down the requirements of CMMC and applying the appropriate level to that?
Actually, that's kind of an interesting question in itself. If their cage code is not listed as having been assessed with the right scores, blah, 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 blah. If you provide them equipment, how do you handle the contractual requirement of the flow down? And I don't know that we've really thought about it quite that way. I think we would probably internally classify it as being they're not getting flowed down data to the company, but we're providing it on the assets. We would go through the extra step of U.S. person validation, things like that, to make sure that they were the right level to have access to CUI. I'm not sure how you'd handle that contractually. It's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, we try to de-identify, and decouple any kind of CUI information, and the flow down is for CUI. So, if we can limit that, then, we can save a lot of headache. So, yeah.
I'd say thank you for the question, and for my team in the audience, it's probably a good thing for us to ask how do we handle that one and still be legal, even though the company itself may not be totally legal.
Right.
This has been so great. I think that at least one or two of you, maybe all of you, have already got your own CMMC level 2. I'm curious if you had the conversation upstream with your primes about, number one, that you're there, because we heard earlier that some of the companies are reticent to announce publicly, but are you having the conversation with your primes? And are you seeing any return on investment with the early award? Is that something that you would share downstream about, if so, the potential for that share of new business that you may have coming in? Anything like that would be more of a carrot than a stick?
We haven't announced yet because we're waiting for the final certificate to come back.
Yeah.
But we did get notified that they put it through the Cyber AB with the final score, so we're claiming success. So we haven't done that as far as
We haven't announced yet, but to your point, we did have one of a prime who shall remain nameless come to us about some business, and when they found out that we were level 2 certified, it was just like, wow, this is awesome. We don't have to worry about you guys. It was and in their words, it was a huge discriminator. Yeah. And so to that point, it's not anything we've flowed down to our sub saying, hey, this is a really big discriminator, but it's something that we will. And also, I believe, in the same in Matt's case, at some point, the front end of the business is going to see that value as a discriminator, and you're going to start to see it in more materials from the front end of the business. But we just haven't done that yet.
Yeah, and for us, we're going through our certification audit in July, so, and we have kind of a mixed emotions at the executive level. On the one hand, the CEO is excited about it. On the other hand, the folks in Guam, they don't care one way or the other because it's a captive market for us down there, right? We're like the only huge construction company down there, and the Navy's constantly using us for everything. So, yeah.
question, what percentage of your suppliers will only require CMMC level 1?
Is that Jacob H back there?
The other one.
Well, one of you has it here and the other one has it here. So just merge together and you'll be whole.
I was going to ask how many need level 2.
So that'll be the clip next year, right? I don't. For us, I'm not sure exactly how many would be level 1 only for us. I don't have a good read on that, honestly.
Does that mean everyone will be level 2?
I think we're expecting everybody in what we're doing with the suppliers that we have to be level 2. I don't think there's any way around it. And to me, and I just kind of go back to the executive side too, like from the very beginning of the foundations of BlueHalo, I've always had the direction from the CEO, like do whatever it is you need to do to keep us where we can do contracts and be secure. And for us, going through the process of getting uplifted and going through CMMC level 2, honestly, for me as the CIO, like it's the only way that I can validate that it's actually happening correctly within my organization, because I don't see all the sausage being made, and having the third-party assessor come through and actually do that and validate and see these guys on the call when they go through this validation and the maturity of the responses and the detail and the firsthand knowledge, like that gives me the tingles thinking like I know that they've done everything right. And to me, that's like true knowledge of where you are security-wise. And so for us and the suppliers, I want to see all of them have that same experience and know that they're actually on their game. So,
Yeah, for us, we don't track that. It'd be really a challenge. But I will say that, again, our supply base is such a mix of, we've been in Inglewood for 60 years, and we work with some really small shops just to do some. And so some of those folks, I think it really comes down to us determining who really needs to get that technical data package. And then most likely, if they do, they're going to need to be level 2. Like you said, they're not going to be level 1.
So maybe the 80 out of 320,000 isn't exactly accurate.
Yeah.
All right, so my question is kind of alluding to something Scott mentioned earlier, was privity of contract, right? Second, third tier contractors. I think it's a big, difficult situation, because if I have a subcontractor working for me, then the contract is between me and the subcontractor. So, and that could go down to third tier as well. Mm-hmm. So how do I make sure that third tier is compliant? And then if DOD is actually going to, if there's an issue with the contract, maybe a sub is not compliant, and there's no contract relationship directly with DOD in that third tier, what responsibility as a prime do I have? And how do I make sure that third tier is compliant?
let him
Pick me.
Yeah, go first.
Only because I have to point out Mr. Jacob Horn there, because I asked that exact same question you asked at when I was at CS2 San Diego, and Jacob answered the question, and he said, the prime is responsible all the way down. So if you have the contract with the government, with the DOD, you're responsible for the entire supply chain all the way down. Did you not say that, Jacob?
Oh yeah, I said it. I'll say it
Okay,
again.
I just want to make sure.
I'll do it again too.
Yeah.
To tie on to that, though, what I would say to do is in your contract with your first tier subcontract, put in language that there's a mandatory requirement for approval of all downstream subcontractors, and that any flow downs that they do to a second and third tier, that it's a mandatory clause for them to flow down all the way, and then request those certificates all the way back up. And if not, they're in default at some level.
Yeah, that's what we do. We put that into the contract so that they have to prove to us that they're compliant. So.
Yeah, and it's also the same thing we're seeing in the secure software development lifecycle stuff and the secure software bill of materials and stuff like this. Like people trying to figure out where is it coming from, what's the source.
Exactly.
Yep.
Alrighty, there was a question online. Are you expecting your supply chain to be certified at CMMC level 2 before the DFARS 7021 clause starts rolling out in the phased rollout?
I don't know, we're not requiring anybody to be that yet. We're requiring them to certify their SPUR scores and stuff like that, that they're compliant with the way you can be compliant nowadays.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be an issue.
Yeah, we're not either.
We're not doing that.
I guess a related question that came in for that one also is between you and your government customer. So at what point are you informing your customers of where your suppliers are at in terms of their compliance? Are you just sort of forwarding along their attestations to you when they're saying, yeah, we're planning on being level 2, and then you're just passing that through and hoping that they actually are where they say they are?
Honestly, only when asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've never been asked.
We've never been asked.
That's crazy. That's
No,
crazy.
so what happens is, you know, when we get the solicitation, we go out, we find the subs and the suppliers and everything, and we've got, you know, our bid to the government. We've already made sure that they are all compliant, that we're using on that project. And when we submit that, you know, and win the award, we never get asked, you know, about the downstream subs and suppliers. That it's just assumed, because we've been doing business with them for 40 years, that we know what we're doing, and they take it for granted, and we've never been asked.
Well, just one take back. In our DIBCAC assessment, they did ask us to prove that we are flowing it down. And so we showed them the mechanism which we flow down the 7012 clause and all the clauses Scott mentioned earlier.
Right.
But that was as far as they went. They saw that we did it. We gave them examples that we flowed it down. They said, great. And that was the end of that.
Are you guys looking to add any of these requirements beyond the 7012 requirement that already exists into existing contracts through modifications or anything like that? Or are you just kind of letting the contracts that exist, you know, continue forward?
Yeah, we're just doing the same thing. Yeah.
Forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I guess I actually have an individual question. So by the letter of DFAR 7012, the subcontractors are supposed to reach out to the prime if they want to vary from any of the requirements in 800-171. They're also supposed to reach out to you to report any incidents that they have related to CUI. And then you're supposed to take that information to the government customer / contract officer. So I'm curious to know, over the last couple years, have any of these sub-tier suppliers requested to vary from the requirements, and have they reported the incidents to you, or are we just hoping that they went to the government directly? Because a lot of times when we talk to subcontractors, they are very hesitant to inform the prime that there's anything afoot, which gives me the suspicion that the government is not finding out about it, because it's clearly happening.
Yeah, we've, I guess the reporting case, we've had one incident that I know about that it's been reported to us, but it was reported to us saying that we weren't impacted by something else that happened within the company that they had to report. And we've not, to my knowledge, we've never been requested to approve a variance at all.
Yeah, and we've not had any requests for variance. We've not had any incidents reported, so.
No request for variance, and some of our more sophisticated subs have reported to us.
Yeah, this will be relevant for everybody tomorrow when we talk to DoD on stage, since we'll be asking them how many variance requests they've been asked. It's an eerily similar number where it's right there in your contract clause and nobody ever asks to try and vary. One of the questions that came in online, what do you do if your customer is the one who's not following the rules with regards to CUI? Are you reporting them for mishandling the CUI, so the relationship between you and your customer upstream, rather than between you and the subs?
I'm going to mute again.
Yeah, go ahead and snitch on your on your government customer real quick. We won't tell.
We got nothing up here.
Yeah, we got nothing to say. No. I mean, we communicate very clearly what their responsibility is and what the regulation is, so that when they're signing up, they're fully aware. They go through all the CUI training, et cetera, incident reporting, insider threat, all of that, and so they know what they're supposed to do. We really haven't. I mean, we're in the building industry, right? So we don't have significant issues in that regard. So we haven't really had any incidents. We haven't had any pushback by a supplier or subcontractor saying, we're not going to, comply with that. And like I said, we try to de-identify data so that they're, for the most part, they're getting COTS, orders and things like that.
But Jacob, were you saying one of our customers?
Yeah, so
is
like
not
for
being
compliant.
compliant?
If you're on the prime and the customer's like, bending the rules, sending you data out of band, they're not following their own procedures, like what's the process for you guys pushing?
Well,
them?
as an example, and I'm sure you're going to talk with the DoD, but there's many of our DoD customers send us CUI that's not marked.
Yeah.
So, that's just it's just common and known that happens, and we don't really do anything about it. We just receive the unmarked CUI, and
Well, then you have the bizarre situation, which I still don't get my head around very well, is they'll send us a file and then they'll send you the password right next in the next email. And it's like, if they've got access to one, they've got access to both. Like, come on, guys. But it's technically legal, but it doesn't make sense.
I misunderstood the question, but I can
Yeah.
tell you now, we've had a number of incidents like that where the customer has sent us emails that it's through the commercial email, and it's marked CUI, okay, right there. And in fact, it was mislabeled. It was CUI on the bottom, but not on the top, okay. We had another instance where, I won't say which branch of the government, or the military, had a third party create this solicitation that they sent it to the Navy. Oh, I said the Navy. Okay. Well, anyway.
Busted.
Okay.
Whitewash.
Okay. But anyways, so they sent it to us protected. It wasn't marked CUI, and it had geolocation and all this other stuff that should have been CUI. But they sent it through a commercial email to the Navy to get it. Navy sent it to us and said, didn't mark it CUI properly. And then they said, so why don't you respond to this, but when you send it to us, send it all CUI, okay? So we had that situation. We had another one where they sent us a solicitation, 1,098 pages, and it was all marked CUI, everything, okay? And we looked at it and said, this is crazy. None of this is CUI, right? We sent it back and said, this is not CUI. And they said, well, go through the document and tell us what's not CUI. And we said, no, that's not what we're going to do. You're giving it back to you, and you tell us what CUI is. So they did, and they remarked it, and it's about maybe 10% of that was CUI. So we have a lot of that kind of stuff going on, quite a bit.
That was the one that they sent to you through Signal, right?
No. Yeah, it was, yeah.
what's that?
And with that,
So,
all right,
You gotta play with it.
I think that just about wraps us up here for this afternoon. As far as this panel goes, thank you guys very much for all of your insights into how you're handling your supply chains. I appreciate it, and congratulations, Matt and
Matt. And John.
Matt
Matt and John.
Matt and John.
and John. Good luck on yours in July.